I was 16 years old in my sophomore year of high school. We had 9 periods in the school day, and the 5th period was lunch. Right after that, I had my astronomy class, which was held in one of the 2 classrooms in the basement. My high school was large, with 3 floors, and even that wasn't enough to accommodate all the offered classes, so the school built 2 classrooms in the basement. Honestly, it was a bit creepy down there when no one else was around. It was originally a janitorial area but had been remodeled to resemble a standard entryway. The only problem was that there were no intercoms or loudspeakers in the basement at that time, which is why classes were not held there during the first period when the morning announcements were made. Everyone referred to these basement classrooms as the room in the small second period, and people would always try to get classes there because it was air-conditioned, and the classes were usually easier. Plus, it had its own bathroom. That day, we had an astronomy test. I was usually one of the first to finish because I found the class easy. After I finished my test, I texted my friend, who was in the other basement classroom, to meet me in the bathroom because I was bored. He said, "Okay." I left the classroom and went down the short hallway to the bathroom. A few seconds later, the door opened, and my friend JJ entered. We joked around for a while until JJ checked his phone and said someone texted him saying the school was going into lockdown. We both looked at each other with the same smirk. None of our teachers had seen us leave the classrooms, meaning we had free reign of the school during the lockdown. We agreed to sneak upstairs and explore the hallways just to see what would happen. The worst that could happen is we'd explain how we didn't hear the announcements in the basement classrooms. When we opened the basement door to the main floor, we were surprised to find all the lights had been turned off, so the hallways were almost entirely pitch black, except for the light flowing in from the doors in the hallway. This was unusual because the lights are usually left on in the hallways during lockdowns. Something was off, and we weren't sure if we felt comfortable wandering around anymore. JJ walked a bit down the hallway, and I followed him. Then he looked down the corridor and said, "Who is that?" I looked, and out of the darkness came a man. At first, we couldn't tell if he was a teacher or not, but as we got closer, we realized this man wasn't dressed like anyone else. The guy was dressed like a drifter. "Okay, let's go," JJ said as we turned to head back to the basement. He had definitely seen us, whoever he was. Both of our classrooms were locked and dark, so to avoid making a scene, we decided to hide in the bathroom. The first thing I did was turn off the light, and then both of us hid in the corner stall. The room was dead silent, no ventilation, no heaters, nothing but my breathing and JJ's, and the occasional drip from the sink. Then, the bathroom door suddenly opened, and light from the hallway briefly flooded the room. The door closed, and the bathroom went dark again. JJ and I did our best to control our breathing, and the room was so quiet that we could hear someone walking toward us from the bathroom. The person stopped and started breathing heavily as if gasping for breath. JJ and I were scared to death. JJ did something incredibly stupid. He whispered in my ear, "We need to crawl through the other stalls." The room was so quiet that even JJ's whisper could be heard across the entire room. The heavy breathing outside the stall stopped, and the person tried pressing on the stall door. That's when I whispered, "Go," to JJ, and we both crawled under the side wall to the next stall, then the next stall, and finally to the other side of the bathroom. The person was now fully banging on the stall door. JJ and I jumped off the floor and opened the door, and when light filled the room again, I saw the man from upstairs standing in the corner. We rushed to JJ's classroom door, and the teacher let us in within seconds. JJ explained everything while the teacher locked the door, pointing out a gun sticking out of the man's pocket. I was shocked to hear that because I hadn't noticed the gun, but I went along with it anyway. Usually, a group of high school students would laugh at 2 students causing a scene like this, but I noticed that all the kids sitting in the corner looked worried. A sudden bang on the door made everyone jump, and 2 girls screamed in fear. JJ, the teacher, and I saw the man standing at the door, looking through the window, trying the doorknob. After a few angry bangs on the door, he turned and walked down the hallway. We didn't know how long the lockdown lasted, but we sat in silence in the room for over an hour, except for the teacher occasionally asking JJ and me questions in a very worried tone. He shook his head after everything we told him. Finally, someone from upstairs called the teacher and instructed us all to walk in a single file down the stairs and out of the building, where we'd be met by the police. JJ and I did our best to describe the man to the police and the principal. One of the officers patted me on the back, and we were sent home. After this incident, the school installed cameras everywhere and increased the security budget. This event never got media attention, and honestly, we never found out if the police caught the guy. I'm convinced that the man had no other intention but to kill us in that bathroom stall. I am a retired police officer from New Jersey, having served for 20 years on the force. The most disturbing call I ever received was during a school lockdown that occurred at a nearby middle school, whose name I will leave out for legal reasons. It happened on a dark, stormy day. I was called via radio to respond to the lockdown, where a menacing-looking man had been seen exiting a white truck parked behind the school and walking towards the back door next to the boys' locker room. I pulled into the back parking lot of the school next to the white truck. There was no one inside, and all the doors and the trunk were locked. I opened the red back door leading into the gymnasium hallway, which was right next to the locker rooms. The main lights were off, so the entire interior of the school was dark. I took my flashlight off my belt and used it to navigate the halls. I reached the school hallway when a woman came out of the front office and quietly asked me to check the boys' locker room, but I needed to be cautious as the person might be armed. I called for backup on my radio and confirmed that they were already on the way. I returned to the hallway I had entered from and found the boys' locker room next to the exit. I pushed the door open very quietly. There were no windows in the room, so there was no light at all in the locker room, just the light from my flashlight. There was a kind of white noise in the room, probably from the air vents in the ceiling blowing air, but even above that, I could hear faint scratching or small tapping sounds on the locker doors from the other side. I was supposed to be the authoritative police officer, but honestly, I was very scared. The tension in the room was insane. I held my flashlight in one hand and my gun in the other as I crept to the other side of the locker room. It felt like no matter where I was, the tapping and banging were coming from the other side. I was standing in the corner of the locker room, right next to the bathroom door, when the sound of someone closing a locker in another room made me jump out of my skin. I went in the direction where I heard the bang, only to discover it was coming from the boys' football team locker room. There was no door separating the main locker room from the football locker room, and the lockers there were 3 times the size. Finally, I gathered my nerves and made my presence known by shouting, "Police!" After I yelled, a child started screaming for help from somewhere in the room. The sound was very muffled, though the child was pounding on the locker door on the other side of the row I was in. When I discovered the boy was trapped inside a locker, I felt sick to my stomach and told him I would be back. I ran outside to find the white truck had disappeared. My biggest mistake was not getting the license plate number first. I immediately asked dispatch to search for a suspicious white truck. I ran back to the school and instructed the front office staff to end the school day and send someone with a key to the locker room to free the boy from the locker. The boy had been held by the man with a knife to his back. The man was apparently trying to quietly move the 12-year-old boy to his truck. The boy had a cut on his arm from resisting the man's attempt to force him into the truck. The man was spotted a week later in a 7-Eleven parking lot, where he was arrested after being properly identified. I was staying at a Hampton hotel in New Jersey while visiting Rowan University, a college I was considering attending. My family couldn't come with me, so I was alone. After attending campus tours, I went for a snack at a nearby restaurant and then returned to the hotel at around 8 p.m. I planned to return to the campus again the next day. About an hour after returning to my room, a strange alarm went off with a white flashing light from the corner of the ceiling. A message started playing shortly after, saying something along the lines of, "Attention all Hampton guests, please remain in your rooms. This is a lockdown." I had never heard of a lockdown in a hotel before and didn't know hotels even had alarms like that. I found it more interesting and exciting than anything else. Eventually, the sound of the alarm stopped, but the light kept flashing, and every 20 seconds or so, the message would repeat. It was only around 9:30 p.m., so I turned on the TV, trying to ignore the background noise while I changed clothes, brushed my teeth, and turned off the lights. When I was done, I jumped under the covers and watched TV for about half an hour before turning it off. The white light was still flashing every few seconds, and it was definitely going to disrupt my sleep. I was starting to think about calling the front desk to ask what was happening when the phone rang. It was someone from the front desk. I expected them to tell me something about the alarm and when it would stop, but instead, the person on the other end spoke in a very worried voice and told me to stay calm and leave the room immediately. I took this chance to ask what exactly was happening, and the receptionist followed up by telling me there was someone in the room with me, and I needed to get out immediately. I dropped the phone and instinctively started looking around everywhere. Part of me was curious to know if there really was someone in the room. I checked under the bed, looked in the empty bathroom, and found no one in either place. Then, I noticed the closet door next to the bathroom, a sliding wooden door. The door was open just a crack, and through that small gap, I could see a person's face. At first, it didn't register what I was seeing, but when the door slid open further, that's when the fear set in, and I rushed out of the room. The people at the front desk showed me security footage from an hour earlier of a suspicious-looking man wandering the hallways, apparently searching for a specific room. When he reached my door, he used a card he had somehow obtained to open it. That's all I remember until authorities led the handcuffed man out. He was, of course, a short man in his 40s. As he passed by, he looked at me as if he instantly knew who I was. It's terrifying to think that he had been watching me for over a year. It was a typically boring day in calculus class. It was Friday, 7th period, which meant the week was almost over, and spring break had finally arrived. Everyone was restless in their seats, and I could tell that we didn't have a test that day, unlike many of my friends with their other teachers. So, in the middle of the class, our teacher decided to quietly start playing with us. He was always a very calm teacher. While we were doing some trivia about brand logos, I remember the exact moment it happened, right after my friend answered a question. I remember the answer being, Adidas. Suddenly, the principal's voice came over the loudspeaker, panicked and distressed, telling all the teachers that this was not a drill and to initiate a lockdown. I immediately got chills, and the hairs on my arms stood up. Our relaxed teacher also panicked, rushing to turn off the lights and guiding us to the back corner of the room. We all sat in silence for about 2 minutes. Then, the usual hum from the panel at the back of the room stopped, indicating that the school had cut all power. We looked at each other, realizing this had to be serious. After a few more minutes of waiting, we heard a man screaming loudly as he ran down the hallway. 2 girls in the class started crying, making us all even more scared as the screaming came closer to our classroom. The deranged man began banging on lockers, yelling, "I will kill you all." At that moment, I started to fear for my life. My teacher whispered for us to stay quiet, and we all looked at each other, gauging our reactions to the noise. The man moved from the lockers to our classroom door, and that's when one of the crying girls screamed, "No." The banging on the door grew louder as the man shouted, "Open up." One of the girls was sobbing uncontrollably, and now it felt like the man was banging on the door forever. Eventually, he moved away, continuing to scream in the hallways like a mentally unstable person, until we couldn't hear him anymore. About 10 minutes later, though it felt like half an hour given the situation, the principal came back on the loudspeaker, explaining the situation, which was as shocking to him as it was to us. He explained that a seemingly mentally unstable person had entered the building and assaulted the woman at the front desk, causing her to flee the building while screaming. The staff wasn't sure if the man was armed or not. This happened before the school had security cameras or could afford proper security, so the school was wide open for something like this to occur. The staff conducted a sweep of the hallways and classrooms but couldn't find the man. The principal ordered the teachers to continue their lessons, but all doors had to remain locked, and no student was allowed to leave for any reason. The most unsettling part was when one of the custodians working the night shift found the man asleep in one of the storage closets near the back of the school. According to the rumors spread by my classmates, the man had a .44 Magnum in his pocket. The janitor apparently made the mistake of waking him up, perhaps by leaving the closet door open, because by the time a police officer arrived at the scene, the man had vanished. To this day, none of my classmates, as far as I know, have any idea whether the man was ever found. But I like to think that he is now receiving the help he needs. My school during lunch periods. The first lunch period is designated for all 6th graders and some 7th graders. The second lunch period is for the other half of the 7th graders and all 8th graders. The lockdown first happened in October. On the day of the lockdown, it was cloudy and rainy during the first lunch period. I heard 4 loud bangs, and I personally thought it was thunder, but the whole lunch crowd started screaming. I thought these kids were just seriously overreacting, but then campus security came and started yelling at people to go to the multipurpose room. The kids who were in line to buy lunch had to abandon their food and go inside. Some friends and I entered the room with a large group of other kids, and everyone was curious about what was happening. Our multipurpose room was huge, and the back wall was made of transparent glass. As my friends and I were being moved inside the campus, security started covering the glass with curtains. There were adults everywhere. My friend Eric was just as curious as the rest of us, so he asked one of the adults what was happening. He said, "You know those houses right in front of TMS?" I answered, "Yes." He continued, "There's this crazy mentally unstable man who barricaded himself in front of his house and is threatening to commit suicide and kill the police if they evict him. He was walking around outside the school, watching the kids in a weird way." Eric told us that it turned out the man was also a registered sex offender, which made things worse. We were stuck in the multipurpose room for a whole hour, which spanned 2 periods. After everything was settled, we were taken back to our classrooms one by one. Later, I found out that the man lived next to my friend Brandy, who had told me about him during the previous Halloween. She had seen the same man at his window, cutting his arm and writing with his blood, "Don't come here, or I'll kill you." Of course, since it was Halloween and Brandy and others were dressed up, she thought it was just for the holiday. But after these horrifying incidents, it became clear that the man was mentally disturbed, and we were all glad that he never got close to us. Mr. Buckley. I'm 22 years old, and I've recently graduated from college. I finally got a job at my old high school as a kind of IT intern. The basement of the school is messy and quite unorganized, but there's a small office that fits 3 people. It's actually very nice down there. It has 3 big desks, 2 small refrigerators, a flat-screen TV mounted on the wall, and also an air conditioner, which is a luxury that students and teachers can't enjoy in the school. Of course, all the school servers and other computer stuff are also there. I got the job because 3 of the former IT teachers absolutely adored me. I can actually consider them true friends, not just school staff, so they all helped me a lot in getting this job. Everything was great until something happened a few weeks ago. My co-workers who share the office with me, Dave and Gary, weren't in the office at the time because they were working upstairs on paperwork or whatever. I was eating my sandwich during my lunch break when I got a phone call from one of the women at the front office telling me that the school was on lockdown and that someone, possibly armed, had entered the building. There wasn't much I could do other than turn off the lights, because surprisingly, Even though this office was small and nice, it didn't have an actual door, just a big opening. Also, the entire basement door didn't have a lock, for my personal safety. So, I did that. I turned off all the lights in the office, the computer screens, and kept my phone on the desk, sending large text messages to Gary and Dave, but they didn't respond. I sat there in the dark, playing games on my phone for about 20 minutes, waiting for a call from the front office to tell me that I could resume working. I had no idea what was going on. I couldn't hear what was happening upstairs from here, but I wasn't allowed to make any calls until I was informed that the lockdown was over. Then, the basement door opened with a creak, echoing through the basement and into my office. I sat in my chair, wondering if I should call out for Gary or Dave, eager to get some information from them. Then someone rushed down the stairs, and their footsteps got closer to my office. I pushed my chair back and crawled under my desk. Someone entered the office but didn't turn on the lights. There was only silence. I can't even describe the fear I was feeling. It felt like if I made a sudden noise, I'd be a dead man. Suddenly, my phone rang as I got a text message. I felt like my whole world was wilting and dying in that moment. I gritted my teeth, terrified as the footsteps suddenly got closer to me, and I finally crawled out from under the desk in surrender, pleading with whoever it was not to kill me. At that moment, someone grabbed my arm and pulled me up. It was a man wearing checkered red jeans and a red hat. He told me it was okay and that he was hiding too. I asked him, "What's going on?" He kind of ignored my question and asked if there was an exit here. I told him, "Yes, this way." Before he could do anything else, I asked, "Who are you?" There was a brief silence before he started explaining that he had come to pick up his son when a teacher told him to hide. After he explained, I checked my phone and saw the text message I had received. It was from Dave, saying, "Hey man, there's a crazy guy with a gun. Mr. Buckley, he's wearing a red shirt and a cap. Whatever you do, don't go upstairs." I was about to read this text aloud to the man when I realized and looked up. My stomach sank. The man seemed to realize my suspicious look and panicked. All I could think of doing was running upstairs. A gunshot echoed through the basement, and I could hear the bullet ricocheting off something metal in the darkness. But, thank God, the bullet missed me, and I made it upstairs. Luckily, the police were waiting at all exits, including the basement exit, and the second man opened the door. More good news, our teacher, Mr. Buckley, survived the shot. It was later determined that the man and Mr. Buckley had some sort of unresolved conflict, but it was never revealed exactly why. All we know is that Mr. Buckley couldn't have done anything to justify that kind of reaction, and I know that the sound of that gunshot will echo in my mind forever.